Buenas tardes, bienvenidos, bienvenidas a los encuentros digitales España-India, una nueva iniciativa que organiza Casa de la India en Valladolid, junto con la Embajada de la India en España, el Consejo Indio de Relaciones Culturales, ICCR, Casa Asia e Instituto Cervantes en Nueva Delhi. Esta sesión de hoy forma parte, de hecho, de un nuevo ciclo que queremos poner en marcha de encuentros digitales que invitarán en cada mes sobre un tema específico de relaciones culturales, pero también deportes, tecnología y ciencia, a personalidades que forman parte de este diálogo, protagonistas que nos hablarán de sus experiencias y de cómo podemos acercarnos más un país a otro, cómo podemos profundizar más para beneficio mutuo. La sesión de hoy tendrá lugar en lengua inglesa y esperemos que todos podáis disfrutar de un debate interesante y al final podéis también meter vuestras preguntas a través del chat. Comenzamos pues con la sesión en lengua inglesa. Good evening, a great welcome to all of you who are listening to this session from India and other parts of Spain. Today's session is the kickoff session of the Spain-India Encounters, a new initiative which Casa de la India has started with its partners, the Embassy of India in Spain, the ICCR, Indian Council for Cultural Relations, as well as Casa Asia, and the Cervantes Institute in New Delhi, and in collaboration with Teamwork Arts in New Delhi. Today's session will focus on cultural management, and we have started this new initiative to analyze through the stakeholders of Spain-India relations, in particular in the field of culture, as well as related areas of technology, science, and also sports. In the coming months, every month, we want to invite a protagonist to speak about their experiences and their vision about how we can take this relationship further and deepen it for mutual benefit. I would like to welcome Ambassador Sanjay Verma from Madrid, Ambassador of India to Spain, who will give us some introductory remarks. From India, we have with us the Director General of ICCR, Dinesh K. Patnaik. Good evening, namaste. It's quite late in India, so welcome, and I hope it doesn't get too late for you. Also from India, at the Instituto Cervantes, Oscar Pujol, Director of Instituto Cervantes, New Delhi. Good evening, Oscar. Also, Sanjoy Roy is going to moderate from India as well. We have him in New Delhi, his head office. Good evening, Sanjoy. And closer to us, closer to Valladolid, is Barcelona. A very warm welcome to Casa Asia Director General, Javier Parrondo. So without further ado and without delaying the session further, I hand over the floor now to Ambassador Sanjay Verma. Thank you very much, all of you, for sparing your time, and we look forward to a very interesting session.
Well, thank you, Gerbo. Namaskar, Ola. Greetings from the Indian Embassy in Madrid. It gives me great personal pleasure. I think this is a dream panel for a variety of reasons. Let me begin by saying a word or two about the fantastic panelists we have this evening. Javier Parrondo is a distinguished diplomat in the Spanish Foreign Office, who's done some very key assignments in Asia. So he's one of those rare Spanish diplomats with a rich Asian background. And he heads Casa Asia, which is a unique institution, call it Track 2, Track 3. I don't think too many countries have this. So during the course of the discussions, I think we can learn from how Spain organizes social, cultural, political relations through this channel called the Casas. So Javier, thank you for being on board.
Thank you, Ambassador.
Oscar, what can I say? You know, in diplomacy, we sometimes meet diplomats who speak your language. For example, we meet a Chinese diplomat or a Russian whose Hindi is impeccable and much better than yours. At least my Hindi is not great. So we had, if Oscar will remember it, last year, BC, before COVID, we released together Oscar's dictionary, Spanish Sanskrit dictionary. And I remember I was on the head table and I said, you know, for a diplomat, it's so intimidating when you meet a foreign diplomat who speaks your own mother tongue better than you do. But today, I have a bloody foreigner who's written a dictionary in Sanskrit. I mean, this takes it to a different level. So that's Oscar, one of our finest Sanskrit scholars on the planet. Somebody steeped in Banaras, and he brings so much. So, it's my personal tribute to dear Oscar. Sanjoy, JLF, whenever I meet him, I tell him 2017, January, two of my best days in life were at the JLF festival. It is like the Kumbh Mela for the mind. And it's a pity I've never been able to attend the Jaipur Literary Festival, one of the greatest literary platforms on the planet. And I'm not sure whether many of you know that in the last few weeks or maybe a couple of months, he has had the pleasure of hosting or bringing to a much larger audience Gloria Stenheim, Jhumpa Lahiri, Siddharth Mukherjee, Ian McEwan, Margaret Atwood, Bernardine Evaristo, Peter Carey. Fantastic, the reach. This is the reach. India not only being a mother country or a fountainhead for culture, but the ability for the new Indians to attract and have a dialogue with global cultures. So, Sanjoy, salam. Thank you for being with us today. And of course, Guillermo, he is an asset. He's the heart and soul of India-Spain cultural relations, both between him and Monica, his lovely wife. They fly the Indian flag very high and do their best to bring India and Spain together. Pattu Dinesh, he's a dear batchmate. We go back 30 years, exactly 30 years back. We began in diplomacy together. One of the sharpest minds in Indian diplomacy, and he has brought a very unique perspective to management of cultural relations. So, he's turning things around, and I really look forward to listening to him this evening. Dinesh will recollect, there is this embassy where, both of us had worked once upon a time. And I used to work on the ground floor. For a couple of months, I handled culture. It's a big country. And then I moved over to heading the economic and commercial division of the Indian embassy. So the venerable ambassador used to keep telling me, you're on the ground floor. My ground floor is to build bridges, positivity, goodwill. That is culture and commerce. The shit, the toxic stuff happens on the first floor, which is political and the defense wing. And so this is the power of culture and diplomacy. Now, when we talk about soft power, that's a very bilateral equation, but the ability for countries to understand each other in cultural terms also has a much larger global significance. For example, these days, it's quite common to hear the transition of power, the distribution of global power, China emerging, etc., and how some great powers are receding, emerging powers like India, etc. So, there was a recent book by David Edelstein. He talks about 4 cases of how global power has shifted in the last 100-odd years, and the least confrontationist movement of power, transition of power was between England, UK, and the US. And that was the least violent or disruptive, is because these two countries shared a common culture, common understanding, a primal cultural similarity. So wherever there is cultural similarities, the chances of conflict just sort of reduce. Now, I was reading somewhere that 8 of the Nobel Prizes in literature have gone to writers who have been diplomats. So there's something about diplomacy and literature and culture. And to build on that, out of the 8 who won the Nobel Prize in literature, 5 are Spaniards. I mean, they've been writing in Spanish. And, two of the names are, one was Octavio Paz and Pablo Neruda. And, both of them, great writers. And so there's something about art, culture, foreign relations, building, a peaceful world together. Talking about India and Spain, the first real attempt for Spain to know India was about 500 odd years ago, when Christopher Columbus took a huge swipe at India, but instead of hitting the ball too long off, it went too long on. And I think for 400 years, there was hardly any sort of contact between our countries. And in my understanding, our cultural relations or understanding has taken place only in the last 60, 70 years, honestly. Before that, there's a big black hole in our relations. And today our relations are essentially economic and commercial relations, which are cushioned by goodwill, a positive understanding, people who feel comfortable with the idea of India. So on the economic front, the trade between India and Spain is about $6 billion a year. There are 200 plus Spanish companies invested in India, and about 50 odd Indian companies similarly placed in Spain. Now, this is a conversation I've had with Dinesh and Guillermo, is that the role of culture is not just to, improve understanding between intellectuals and academia, but it also to bring that understanding and raise the comfort level and reduce the cultural shock for potential investors, potential business people, or people who would want to settle into each other's country for whatever reason. So there is now a very definite role for culture to play, is to make space familiar, working space familiar, for people who otherwise bring an intellectual understanding of issues. Our assets in Spain is, of course, Casa India, which we will talk about in the course of the conversation, and ICCR through its scholarships, about 10 scholarships, about two chairs in Valladolid University, constant financing of troops coming to this part of the world, and in recent years, cinema, yoga, gastronomy, personalities like Tagore, Gandhi, Mother Teresa. These are things which bring us together. Films. I was watching Shakuntala Devi the other day, lovely gem of a biopic, and in that, what I learned, and I didn't know before, Shakuntala Devi, for those who don't know about her, was the human computer, the pop maths wizard. And she made a name all over the world, in Europe. And one of the most critical personalities to her flowering to a larger platform was a Spaniard. And he held her hand. They obviously had a very close relationship for several years. And this film brings it out. Now, this gentleman, the Spaniard called Javier fictitiously in the film, is something we don't know about. I wrote to the director, Anu Menon, and she said it's based on Shakuntala Devi's daughter's, recollection. So they themselves aren't really aware of who the Spaniard is. But a platform like this, and if we can pick out Javier, I mean, these are the bridges, cultural bridges who need to be celebrated, recognized, acknowledged. To conclude, the questions I would, want the panel to address is, in my understanding, the cultural universalization, Indian cultural universalization through embassies suffers from a few, limitations. One is that geographically all our efforts get restricted to capitals, or in our case, Valladolid or Barcelona. It's again a captive audience to Indophiles, and the same set of peoples are likely to attend your events year in, year out. And we need to have a new dialogue with younger audiences, younger content creators. And how do we tackle the lack of time available, or the competition between OTT platforms, the digital platforms, and the presentation of culture? And how do we sort of program it? So these are the questions which probably trouble us or excite us at the same time. So I would thank you for this opportunity, and I keenly look forward to the discussions we will have now. Thank you.
Wonderful. I think this was a brilliant introduction which sets us on the right tone, and I now hand over the floor to Sanjay Roy. I remind audiences that they can post their queries and questions in the chat in the system, Zoom system, and we will have in total about 90 minutes, so there's still a lot of time for discussion. Thank you, Ambassador, and welcome to be part of the session at any time you would like to introduce new queries. Please feel free to do so. Sanjoy?
Thank you so much, Yermo, and thank you, Ambassador Verma. As Yermo said, if you can just put in your questions either in the question and answer box at the bottom of the Zoom link or into the chat box, and I'll keep looking at them and perhaps bringing some of the questions out to the fore through the conversations. Ambassador Verma, I will come back to you to pick up some of the questions that you have posed and also ask you about some of the experiences that you have had in your early career. So please hang in there. And I'm going to first sort of really set the stage, and before asking Yermo a little bit about the background of Casa India, I'm not going to introduce everybody again because I think Yermo and Ambassador Verma has done that. I'm just going to set the stage for our conversation today. As many of you know, Casa India was set up in Valladolid some years ago. It was really the initiative of an individual, or in this case, two individuals, somebody who had come out to Kerala, who had studied and then traveled back and was so keen to take a slice of India back as part of that, which was Yermo Rodriguez and Monica. Yermo was able to get the University of Valladolid involved in creating and building what we now know as Casa India. And then he, being a force of nature, then walked around and got so many different kinds of people involved. He got a whole facade from Gujarat of a Haveli and had it shipped out and had it installed. So, you know, you need to be a force of nature to be able to do this. But Yermo, perhaps you can set the stage. I mean, you know, in India, many of your friends regard you as an ambassador of India to Spain, but they pretty much regard you as they regard Oscar as an Indian. And in many ways, both you and Monica, Monica steeped in the dance form of Bharatanatyam, which she learned, you with your research, whether it was with Ramanujan and all of the other work that you did with your PhD, what sort of attracted you to choose India to begin with? What was your journey? And how did that journey finally reflect and take you back to Valladolid, which is your home, to create what we now know as Casa India?
Thank you, Sandra. I wasn't expecting that you would start with answering such personal question, but I think it's part of the you know, I think all institutions have their stories, and I was fortunate enough to be around at a time when I met the right people to take such an initiative forward. And I think I'm sure Oscar can say the same thing around the same time, because even Cervantes Institute and Casa and Casa, they have a common root around the same period. We're talking about beginning of this millennium, you know, around the year 2000, 2001, 2002. So we have common linkages, and I think something was happening at that time, and things just came together. On the one hand, I think Spain was starting to open up their vision towards the East, towards Asia. And of course, China came first. China was already, you know, a big attraction in the 90s. And for the commercial wings, it was in chambers of commerce. It was like the new thing to go. I'm talking 20 years ago. But at the same time, some of the universities were opening up. It's perhaps difficult to understand for other European countries like Germany or France, who have had Oriental studies and Indology for so many years. In Spain, we have to look at something which was quite minimal. I mean, the starting point was a few university departments who had linguistic studies, Indo-European studies, Sanskrit, but there wasn't really much of a focus on contemporary India, or even more important, the dialogue between contemporary India and the past. And through my personal linkages with India, I had studied there for almost a decade, 8 years in the 90s, thanks to ICCR, who gave a scholarship to my wife. Monica was doing dance, and we were able to stay there. I then we later got scholarships also from the IFE, which is the Spanish Agency for International Cooperation. So again, this is to show how important these scholarships are, and I cannot stress that. And I think Oscar can also be a witness of that. The work and the pioneering, even though they were just a handful of scholarships, those ICCR scholarships and IFE scholarships were so crucial. They have nurtured, they allowed a generation of scholars to, go out there and study. And if we were to look at the input and then output of that, investment-wise, it's just amazing that through these scholarships, some of the most important protagonists of this dialogue will be able to grow. So that said, when I came back around the year 2000, I found that I have an academic background, and I always say Casa has a knowledge base. It's a knowledge based project, and that's important because we somehow analyzed a group of experts, and there were a few others, definitely Oscar at the time, who was also thinking of coming back and starting at Casa, that contemporary India was not present, and definitely not something talked about, and in cultural relations there was just a minimal visibility through the embassy. So roping in the university first, yes, was crucial, knowledge-based project. Having the double perspective of looking at contemporary India without rooting it out of the past, not only commerce and business, yes, of course, that as well. So past and present, arts, culture, along with the commercial department, because we tied up. So the commercial and business aspect was there from the beginning, and the institutional side, very much like the three tiers that also Casa Asia had, no? Culture, institutional relations, cooperation, and academic relations. So bringing all these three together in a 21st century project required bringing in also investors, and the closest investor we had was the City Council. The content was provided by ICCR. We already had that, and the embassy was with us. So it was just about creating the right formula. And I think the beauty about Casa de la India is, and having the right leaders at the time, the Vice Chancellor and the Mayor who had the vision, and the DG of the ICCR, and of course, very important, the embassy at the moment, to create a joint venture. So the beauty, as I said, and the uniqueness of this idea is that you have, perhaps it's a unique setup where you have the Republic of India, and two entities like the university and the City Council being part of a foundation. So the dialogue is already within the legal setup. It was already a dialogue to create this institution per se. So we have the perspective from India, and that in the heart of Spain, because where is Valladolid? Valladolid is really like going into the heart of Spain. It's rooted to the origin of the Spanish culture, Castilla, not too far from Madrid. So this was kind of the idea. Of course, it sounds very abstract, but there's a lot of hard work behind, with a lot of passion, and bringing in this journey of my own academic work, as well as the performing arts angle that Monica was bringing into the picture. And of course, with a lot of resilience, something I learned only in India. I think, having not been able to live there for 7-8 years, I had not had the strength and the resilience to push this and pull this through. And I have to say, just to end this introduction, that I noticed one thing. It was maybe possible because Spain and India are so similar in their ways of being very passionate, at the same time very proud. You have a clash sometimes because the two countries are very proud, but they somehow, there's a strong attraction, and also they have the same habit of improvising, sometimes pushing things to the limits. So I think this was also possible because of that. And I realized at some point, I said to one, you see how close and we are, because we're doing the same thing on both sides. So it's interesting to see how things happening from both perspectives. And I can remember very well that the first memorandum of understanding we signed was with Casa. At the time, was John de la Riva and Oscar was handling culture. And we started something called the Spain-India Dialogue Forum, something which later merged into a business forum. And I think might want to take this up again. It was a dialogue forum which brought together from the business, political angle as well, dialogue, as well as culture and academics, the stakeholders, thinkers, and I think it can be something even that is done online. It doesn't have to be in presence. So here we go. Here's the first initiative I would like to throw at my co-panelists, a dialogue forum which could take place without much expense because it's difficult to organize these events. They cost a lot of money in those years. And one of the reasons perhaps the dialogue forum had to cease to exist was because of the crisis, the 2008-2009 crisis. It was very difficult to manage these. We called it in Spanish the Tribune, the Spain-India dialogue.
Guillermo, let's come back. Let's hold that thought and let's come back to you on that. I'm going to move to Ambassador Patnaik. Ambassador Patnaik, the other day with a foreign minister of a European Union country, with Zeni Minton Bidos, who was the head of the managing editor of The Economist, and a few others on JLF Brave New World. One of the questions that came up was looking at the geopolitics of the world today and the fact that, you know, there has been an absence in the way the principle of the world, which is the United States, sort of has in many ways let go of the reins. And of course, UK had let go quite some time ago. And when I said, so what is the future? And both the foreign minister as well as Zeni Minton Bidos and the writer, all three collectively said, it is time for India and the European Union to step up to the table and take charge, because this is the new tomorrow. So the question I have for you, Ambassador Patnaik, is that, you know, for a long time, you know, we've looked west, but looked not necessarily at countries that we are not familiar with in terms of languages. So we've looked to the United States, we've looked to the UK. Our migrations have also been to these places. But in more recent times, whether it's illegal migrations or otherwise, we've seen that happening into places like Spain, into Europe. You know, a Spanish enclave still tends to get some of the largest number of illegal migrants. So there's obviously an interest and an enthusiasm. In your reckoning, and you know, you have returned in recent years from Africa, from Morocco, where you were serving as our ambassador. In your reckoning, is India today poised to be in a more constructive dialogue with our European Union partners, and specifically in this case, Spain?
Well, thank you, Sanjay. This is something, it's a very good question. What I wanted to tell you about is, let's start from the other side, which is that there are really not many Indians in Europe. If you look at it as a number, the number of Indians in Europe is one of the lowest if you look at it as percentage. And the illegal migrants going in is less. In fact, in the last few years, there's been a large flow of legal migrants into Europe. And they have been to countries which are not English speaking. So countries like Germany. For example, at a certain time, we were worried that there will be more students going to Germany than to UK. UK numbers had fallen to about 14,000 and Germany numbers had gone up to 16,000 a year. Of course, UK has rebounded after they have increased their visa things to about 30,000 now. But the whole point is there is a large interest in legal migration to Europe. And this is something which government of India also has been pushing to a large extent, that legal migration should overtake illegal migration. Now, illegal migration is a different matter. We can talk about it. It's all economic reasons. But if you look at relationship between India and Europe, India was always interested because we shared a lot of things in common with Europe. We shared democratic values, rule-based system. We had a system which worked on differentiation between the judiciary, the political system, and the legislature. So there was a lot of things which were similar between us. Europe was the one which was a laggard to some extent. Europe just saw India as an exotic place, but not as an economic partner or a political partner. It wanted to play a more balanced field between India and some of our neighbors. It was more fascinated by China to some extent because it saw easy access in China, because decisions were easier in China than they were in India. Europe didn't want the same kind of democratic stagnancy that took place in Europe to also come from India. So, both sides, if you take a long time to take a decision, for example, the FTA has been discussed for the last 10, 15 years, and we still haven't progressed beyond a certain point. Because both sides have systems which do not allow for quick decision making. So Europe found it easier to deal with a China where the decision making was quick. But frankly speaking, they have a lot more in common with India. And that they're discovering slowly. They're discovering that it's easier to work with India. It's much simpler to work with India. The systems are the same. The common law systems are the same. The legal systems are the same. They do not get two different systems. That is something which is, one is, like everybody says, like the elephant's teeth. There are one for showing, one for eating. So it's not the same which India has that other countries do not give. So in a sense, I'm positive because there's a change in the way people look at India now in Europe. And Indians also did not see much of Europe except UK, because UK was English speaking, and there were also people who had gone there before. So, in Indians have a generally herd mentality. If there are Indians who have gone before, there are more Indians who follow. But now they're going across. So it's students, business people, professionals, everybody going across. So that gives you a greater position to do your cultural relations. Because I have always believed you cannot do cultural relations in a vacuum. You need good economic relations so that you have business interests, which will help the cultural relations. You need tourism, you need students to go, you need educational relationship. All these things put together develop a comprehensive, what Sanjay kept on saying about the soft power relationship. Now, I don't like the word soft power, so I call it cultural relationship, because soft power is an oxymoron that really doesn't exist. And recent trends around the world have shown that soft power has its limits and hard power really comes into play. But if you look at cultural relationship, that's a completely different ball game. It's not a power game. It's a game in which you actually have admiration across both sides. Now, when you look at this, it works on three phases, which is you admire what is there on the other side. From the admiration, you get inspired by the fact that there's something happened. Like, for example, Guillermo, Monica got inspired to come enough to learn dance in India. And then you aspire to be like that country. And when you reach the aspiration level is when you realize that both sides are the same. And what Sanjay again said, which I loved very much, is that if your culture finally integrates into something common, you have less problems with each other. So I'm very sanguine and I'm very optimistic about the fact that India and Europe will come up to the table, but we have to get our act together. And in this, when I say act, one is that we have to recognize that we are important for each other. And the second thing, we have to get our economic system in order. Europe is very good. We need to also get up to it. So if we can do both of this, the rest of it can happen.
Ambassador Patnaik, I'm going to come back to you on the cultural front, and I'm going to ask Ambassador Verma about getting our act together. But let me go to Javier Porondo. Javier, when I first came to Casa Asia, thanks to Yermo, and we came to your beautiful offices and met Jean de la Riva, and we met Oscar for the first time. I met Oscar for the first time in this beautiful room with the light streaming in, and we talked Sanskrit and philosophy. I remember there was a sense, because I was there, selling a dream of creating a India-Spanish festival in Spain. These were the early 2000s, etc. And we hadn't yet set up anything. But at that point of time, Casa Asia wasn't really they were enthused, but it wasn't like they were leaping to start looking at India in any different light. It was still some of the countries like China that was pretty much part of their remit. India, perhaps, Oscar was the sort of champion, I think, in many ways in Casa Asia. Has that changed? Has that changed? And if you can also touch upon, Casa Asia today looks at so many different silos. Dinesh, I think you've got two things. You've logged on two systems.
I have a mistake. Yeah, that's okay.
So in your different silos, you're looking at science, you're looking at technology, you're looking at business, you're looking, of course, at diplomacy and all the political aspect of it. Has the understanding changed, and has our relationship sort of stepped up, and is it ripe to leverage for the future?
Thank you very much, Sanjoy. And thank you, first of all, to Casa de la India for organizing these encounters and for the kind invitation. I'm so glad to share this dialogue with Ambassador Verma, my dear friend Oscar, and Ambassador Patnaik. Casa Asia was created in 2001, so next year we are celebrating our 20th anniversary.
Thank you very much. Enjoy.
In this period, India, I think, has raised its profile, and we are doing more and more activities on India. It is true that at the beginning, we very much focused on countries such as Japan, China, and South Korea, which used to be the bulk of our activity. But now we reached the conclusion that the Asia-Pacific region is so wide that we need to deepen our focus. So include new areas, in particular, the Indian subcontinent and India. So I want to believe that in these 20 years, we are giving more and more importance to this country. And why? Because we are, I want to underline this introductory idea, natural partners in every field, but in cultural management in particular. And as Dinesh has mentioned, this is partly because we share values. And this is very important when it comes to culture. We respect democracy, rule of law, human rights. So there is a basis of confidence that enable us to work better in cultural field and others, political, economic, scientific. I will address that later on, but this is a good basis to work together. On the top of that, I think Spain and India have managed to create like administrative structure. We have several agreements which give us the support to deepen our cultural relation. Spain signed with India an agreement on cultural cooperation as early as in 1982. So this gives a marvelous opportunity to work together in this field. Apart from that, in 2012, we signed an agreement on audiovisual cooperation. So cinema, for example, I think is a field in which we could deepen our cooperation. This is just, Sanjoy, to mention that we have the best foundations for richful and successful cultural cooperation. I would like to add that apart from culture, strictly speaking, we should widen a bit the approach. We should talk about gastronomy, we should talk about sports, we should talk about cinema that I just mentioned, and also what we call scientific diplomacy, all related to science and innovation, in which India has shown all its potential. So I think in the times we are going through now, in which China wants to play a more prominent role in international relations, India offers us the possibility to counterbalance in Asia this influence, and also for the European Union as a whole, and Spain in particular, to have an array of relations which are more varied, not focus its attention on the rivalry, on the on the animosity between China and United States, and focus in countries which can play a role to ease tensions. And this is what I see the space for India. And finally, Sanjoy, for me, when we talk about cultural management, we talk about the management of diversity. So Spain and India are in a unique position to offer some lessons bilaterally and to others. we have Muslim influence, both of us. We have the Hindu culture. In your case, the British influence. So we are, as I said, in a unique position to share best practices in managing diversity. So many ideas, but I just give it, share with you.
I'm going to come back to you about the sports because, you know, Real Madrid and Barcelona, I think, are your biggest ambassadors. And we'll come back to food and film in a second. Let me go to Oscar Pujol, dear friend and an incredible, I think, ambassador of Spain to India, as well as an ambassador of India to Spain. Oscar, you know, one of the things, obviously you know this, but perhaps our audience doesn't know, that many Spanish writers are superstars in places like Kerala and Bengal, etc. They know their work. M.A. Baby, who used to be a minister in the Kerala government, used to swear by half a dozen Spanish writers at least. People like filmmakers like Pedro Almodovar, and when Guillermo Casa de la India, Casa Asia, Igada, and we used to do the Spanish Film Festival, you used to have lines of people which went around the block, whether it was for a Fernando Colomo film or for a Pedro Almodovar film, or even to watch Bebe when she arrived, and this is even before she became a pop star. You yourself, Oscar, as a writer, you've been to, you know, literary festivals across India, and you've been received pretty much like one of our own, you know, whether it's at GLF or the Kerala Literature Festival, etc. Tell us, you know, with the establishment of Cervantes, and now congratulations, Cervantes has a beautiful home in the heart of New Delhi, very close to Connaught Place, behind Hanuman Mandir. So it's both auspicious as well as centrally located and so on and so forth. What do you feel has changed? Because as I was saying before we started the seminar, more and more people, young people, have wanted to start learning Spanish, which is primarily one of Cervantes Institute's primary responsibilities, to the extent that just in Delhi NCR, you now not only have Cervantes, you have a new academy just across the river in Noida. You have a university with whom, Amity University, with whom you all have signed a new agreement to be able to teach classes. And there's a sudden explosion. And everybody coming out of Cervantes, all these institutions are being snapped up in jobs. Tell us why. I mean, because one of our colleague, Guillermo knows Rahul Sen, our colleague, very well. And his wife, for example, has been to Cervantes and she studied. And I think the day she got out of Cervantes, she got a job. Tell us a little bit about that journey and your own personal journey as to why you've always looked at India as home, and why Sanskrit. Yes, it's the closest to computer language, it's the closest to music, it's the philosophy of an age-old, but why Sanskrit?
Well, thanks, Sanjoy, and so nice to be with all of you, you know, feeling like being in a family. It's really wonderful, you know. And well, you made many questions into one. I don't know where to begin. Just I want to say one thing, and especially because it's a pleasure to meet Dinesh here, Patnaik, that I am a product of ICCR, like Monica. I got a scholarship from ICCR. I went to Banaras. I studied Sanskrit there. And that was a big opening for me, you know, and it was a joint scholarship with ISC and ICCR. And that really make a big change. I think Guillermo's already said, those scholarships, which were, you know, I mean, even if it was not a big amount of money, were so useful actually for us because they open us, you know. So we should have more schemes like that, no? That's really important, no? But when one thinks about the relation, cultural relation, Spain-India, the image of Spain in India, I'm not talking now about India and Spain, and also how the Spanish language is growing in India, one should feel elated, actually. It's really incredible. I should say, you know, and that the big change in India culturally, I don't know if you will agree with me, Sanjoy, began in the 90s when cable television came to India. And that kind of cultural autarky, that because you had music was Indian, TV was Indian, cinema was Indian, it started to change. I remember at that time I was doing my PhD in Banaras, and I also started the Spanish language program at BHU, where now we have a lecturership. And all of a sudden, we began to see people wanting to learn Spanish because they wanted to have a Latin body. Because all of a sudden, you know, all the Latin American flamenco music, literature was already known, as you said, the big authors, but it was a big change. It began there, you know, slowly, slowly. Still, we didn't have such numbers as we have today. And I remember Spanish was almost an unknown language in India 3 decades ago. And now is one of the preferred language of India. In terms, India today made a study that learning Spanish in India is the third foreign language that gives you the best salary after Chinese and after French. And Spanish is also now the third foreign language in India. Still, French and German are ahead of Spanish, but I don't know for how long, no? And so the change began in the 90s. When we started the Cervantes, we were pretty sure that the seeds were there for Spanish to flourish. And I remember this anecdote, which my friend, and it was also at that time, you know, my colleague and boss, and Philippe Robertet was the one who came here, and together we chose the building. And it was such a huge building, you know, it's not a cheap one, you know, you may imagine it's in the heart of, and he said to me, Oscar, can you assure me that we'll have enough students for this building? And I said, yes, Philippe, we will have so much students for that. But I couldn't imagine, you know, that we will be the Instituto Cervantes with the highest number of students in the world, doubling the second one, no? And it's been growing slowly, and there are several reasons for that. Often it is said that Spanish opens the door, of course, to Spain, but also to Latin America. But it opens for Indians, it also opens the world to the States, to United States. And when we think for a continent like America, I don't mean the country America and the States, but the whole continent, speak Spanish, with some Portuguese in Brazil, with some English in the States and in Canada, but you can go through Brazil with your Spanish and everybody will understand you, not only because both languages are close, but because, I mean, they learn a lot of Spanish. The country that has the highest number of students is the States in the world of Spanish students. So this attraction for the young people, I will say that our students do not learn primarily for cultural interest, but for professional interests, because it opens many, many doors, and especially in the American continent. No? So that's one reason. Another reason, of course, is that Spanish is a very easy language to learn for an Indian. I mean, we struggle to get right our Hindi pronunciation, and even after years, we are not able to do it properly. But you will start speaking Spanish, and in no time, you will get such a nice accent, you know, perhaps not like a continental Spanish, but like a Latin American, you know. So, and the culture is also there. I always say that we speak the same emotional language. And Guillermo already said that, no? And Spanish culture is very attractive to Indians, as Indian culture is attractive to us, no? So I think there are several reasons for a student of Spanish in the Cervantes. When he enters the building, you know, he feels completely as he's in Spain, and he has this experience, you know, of really sensing the whole of the Spanish culture, no? I think that the Covita somehow. So what I would only say, you know, that Spanish has an enormous potential. One of the most things that please me more, I'm coming back to India after 7 years, being in Brazil, being in Morocco. And when 10 years ago, hardly any school, and I mean private schools in Delhi, taught Spanish. We started that. It was like DP and a few schools started. Now, you know, there are so many schools and that have Spanish as the first as a language. No, I don't know if you saw this popular series Patal Lock, where in the very first episode you see a Spanish school, a Spanish being taught in a school in India. That we couldn't think about that, say, 20 years ago. No, so a whole change has taken place, and there are many factors. I say, America is helping us. Our culture is helping us. Our soccer is helping us. Our food is helping us. Zindagi na milegi dubara, it helped us very a lot, and it continues to help us. And well, right now, just to cut it short, I would say that just before the pandemic set in, my first priority was to open extensions of Instituto Cervantes all over India. And we did several trips to Kerala, to Karnataka, to Punjab. We had a trip also to Bombay. And then the pandemic set in, you know, and we became grounded in Delhi, you know. But the good thing, what the COVID is teaching us, and that I think is very useful, is that now we begin to have students from all over India, because our media has changed. And our media now, I mean, it allows us. So I think, just to cut it short, no, I think Spanish has a bright future in India, no? On our side, what we are not doing so well sometimes, and I don't say about the Cervantes, but I say in general, no? Let's say like the French and the Germans, and comparations are not nice, but the French and the Germans, you know, they give a lot of incentives. They have a lot of scholarship programs, they have a lot of residencies, they have job offers, and in a way, no, even if Spanish is the second world language in terms of international communication, no, French and Germans are able to push because they have a very solid planification and institutional programs. And just to close it, that's our weak point, I think, both for Spain and India, that we plan little, we improvise a lot, and we should, you know, take the opportunity. I mean, we should learn together, you know, how to be make better planning and make our institutions more solid and with a vision of future longer. And then I think Spanish will be, you know, really the first foreign language in India.
Thank you, Oscar. I'm going to take a couple of questions, and then I'm going to add a question for you, Oscar. So one question that's coming from Sakrandar is, what language is most similar to Sanskrit, Spanish or Catalonish? And somebody has asked, anonymous asked, how an Indian student can go to Spain while studying in Cervantes? But hold the answer, Oscar, because to you and to Javier, I have a question in terms of, you know, people understand each other through their literature. It's the best way to understand the way a country works, a people thinks, their food, their world, their philosophy, their economy, the way to do business. Because if you don't understand the people, you can't do business. How can, between Cervantes, between Casa Asia, between ICCR, how can we get more translations of Indian good fiction into Spanish, fiction and non-fiction into Spanish, and Spanish writing into available to be distributed in India, because a lot of Spanish writing is already accessible in English. There is a lot of it already translated into Bengali and into Malayalam, but not enough in the other languages. So is there a plan, Oscar and Javier, in this area? And also the two questions that I asked you, Oscar, which is closest to Sanskrit, and how from Cervantes can you go to Spain?
Well, you know, Catalan and Spanish are both, the closeness to Sanskrit is more or less the same. I mean, the European language closest to Sanskrit is Lithuanian. It's, I mean, from the linguistic point of view, and that's well proved, no? But what I would like to say is that just recently we are, I mean, the situation has changed. Just, I mean, a few months ago, DC Ravi, you know, from the Kerala Literary Festival, you know, he asked help because they want to translate again Garcia Marquez. The translations that we have now in Malayalam are from English, and they want to translate it from Spanish into Malayalam, no? And he asked for help. And then we make a search among students and among Indian students of Spanish. And we found two wonderful girls, you know, that they are completely fluent in Spanish and they are Malayali natives, you know, and they are like to write. So now we have a new generation of Indian and speaking people that they are barely 25, 26 years old, that they were not there 10 years ago, and that now they're in place, and that they be able to translate from, say, Malayalam, Bengali. Bengali was different always, because we know Bengal, but Marathi and Kannada and Telugu. So that has changed. And now if you are able, and in the Cervantes, we can pinpoint these people. We can say, we have these people in Hyderabad, that in Bangalore, because they are somehow related. So that has changed. And according to institutional programs, well, the Ministry of Spain has a program for helping to translate Spanish words into foreign languages. And we should take advantage of that, no? I mean, the Cervantes has not big schemes for translation. I think ICCR and Sahitya Academy are also doing a lot of work on that. But the whole thing has changed completely.
I'll come to that. Let me ask, Javier, did you have anything to add to Oscar's this thing in terms of understanding each other's culture through literature?
Sure. Well, I think in general, Asian literature is not very well known in Spain. It's not popular because it's not known. And Indian literature is not an exception. I think, as Oscar mentioned, we should analyze all the schemes provided by national or regional institutions to promote the translation into Spanish of Indian books written in English or other languages, because there are several schemes provided by the Ministry of Culture and, as I say, also regional and city councils institutions. Maybe Valladolid is an example, which hosts Casa de la India. Another avenue in that regard, Sanjoy, could be the participation of either the public sector, the Ministry of Culture of Spain, or private companies, publishing companies in the wide, in these fairs, book fairs that are so popular in India. I would like to underline, for example, the importance of the New Delhi Book Fair, the Hyderabad Literature Festival, or the Jaipur Literature Festival. So we should somehow promote the participation of Spanish actors in these fairs, because we need to create networks. I always believe in the creation of networks, people-to-people exchanges, but in this sector, this people-to-people exchange is key. Another area that we could work further is ASEF. I am also the representative to ASEF, which is the Asia-Europe Foundation, which is based, as you know, in Singapore. 51 member states are part of this process, the ASEM process, Asia-Europe meeting. So there are many areas in the daily work of ASEF to promote literature. That's another opportunity. ASEF, it's a platform that could provide both India and Spain possibilities of collaboration in this field.
Thank you, Javier. Just to tell you both that, you know, with JLF, with the Jaipur Literature Festival online platform, we now have a focus on Europe with the European Union formally and Brussels. So every month we'll be doing 4 European authors. So we welcome any suggestions from you. And remember, economics, politics, statecraft, governance, water, technology, environment, of course, fiction and poetry. So do send us the thoughts. Ambassador Verma, coming to you. The last time we met, we sat, I flew in, we had lunch at the Piazza. You, me, and Sangeeta had a wonderful lunch, and then I had to jet off to, I think, Portugal, because I was attending the conference, music conference there. Food is really, as I think Javier said, and I'm going to ask Dinesh, food is a connector between people, between countries. And yet in Spain, as we know, while Spain's culinary work is just astonishing. I mean, San Sebastian, the Valladolid food festival that they have, Barcelona in the old city, Madrid itself, some of the most wonderful restaurants that you can go to. And yet, Indian food, which Spaniards seem to love. I mean, you know, every time Yermo's brought a delegation, mayors have come into our home and literally eaten us out of hearth and home because they've loved the food so much. Why haven't we used that as a diplomatic tool to actually help create opportunities for not just tourism, but the service industry, etc., invite perhaps some of the great chefs from India or the chains to set up something that's substantial there, but hold the answer because I'm going to also put two questions that have come for you. And the first one is from Chitti Reddy Sripal, who said, Ambassador Verma indicated that cultural relations are beyond bilateral. How can Spain act as a bridge between India and Latin America, which contribute to greater business and political relations between India and the wider Spanish-speaking world? The second is a passing question by Skarandar, who says, has the Embassy of India organized an essay contest on COVID? If so, when will the results be known? And Pallavi Iyer says, I'm an Indian with a Spanish husband. Our boys will be the future of India-Spanish relations. We need more bilateral romance. Ambassador Verma.
Well, I want to volunteer for romancing a Spanish lady. I can start off by saying that.
Sangeeta, please note.
All right, on gastronomy, I think it's a very complex subject and probably would require a special show, and I would encourage either JLF or Casa de la India or ICCR to look at it very seriously. I think Indian food is its greatest strength, but it's also its greatest weakness. Its greatest weakness is because we have foregrounded a type of Indian food. We have gone heavy on its ingredients, neglecting large parts of cuisine available in the country which are more friendly to a universal palate. The advantage Spanish food has is it's, I wouldn't say taste neutral, but it hovers around flavors which are acceptable by a larger global clientele. It comes in smaller portion, it comes quick, it's hygienic, it's affordable, and it's available across various outlets at any time of the day or night. In India, I think sanitation, hygiene is something we need to fix because why foreigners, even Indians get a Delhi belly when we go back. So once you have a Delhi belly on the first day of your holiday and you're there for 10 or 15 days, it just about ruins everything for you. So we need to correct that. There have been exchanges of chefs, going either way. There are hundreds of Indian restaurants. I mean, my Spanish friends here will recollect that even 15, 20 years back, there were hardly any Indian restaurants. But again, Indian restaurants is again a subject of its own. Is there minimum standards maintained? Now, restaurants themselves are a diplomatic outpost to a certain extent. Certain countries have managed to use that and leverage it. We haven't. Now, that's why a session on gastronomy is important, because we need to bring this all together. Indian restaurants, how do we project Indian food, affordability, drinks. For example, a foreigner comes, apart from Mumbai and a few southern Indian states, who would struggle to get a drink unless he goes to a five-star hotel. Are we willing to challenge that dilemma? So, that's gastronomy. Coming back to the question of what was it was.
So one is bilateral relations and more romance.
Latin America.
And
okay,
yeah.
This is something that's a work in progress. Dinesh with ICCR and Oscar and Cervantes and Casa Asia, we're looking at building up a relationship where we can leverage our relative advantages, Indian cultural assets in Asia, and the Spanish cultural assets in Latin America, how we can utilize them to further, sharing of, cultural space between our countries. In the business arena, it's a very interesting subject. I personally feel a lot of the Spanish companies, MNC companies from Spain have, focused on Latin America, have done business there for years. It's an easier market, it's a smaller market. It's a market dominated by the Spanish companies. That in some ways has spoiled them to invest in Asia, because in Asia, the competition is much more harder. Indian smaller companies themselves struggle against larger Indian companies. But the Spanish mindset, I mean, here talking about Latin America, in a sense, we will have to attract them to Asia, attract them to India in particular, because we are a huge, huge market. The Indian market is probably 2 or 3 times Latin America, and our market is going to grow, not decline. And here, Spain, Spanish companies can probably look at collaboration with Indian companies for Latin America. There are Indian companies in Latin America, but I think it's restricted to the auto space and pharma space, or backroom, business operations, etc. So there is definitely space. I think this is again something which needs to be worked on. And I think with Cervantes, Casa Asia, the respective embassies, we will need to take it forward, because Latin America has attracted India's attention. We've talked about opening several more missions in Latin America, like we have done for Africa. So this, there is, I mean, you can keep saying there's a potential, but that potential has to be taken home, has to be mainstreamed. But yes, there's a lot of work to do for diplomats and for cultural managers like your kind self.
Thank you, Ambassador Verma. Ambassador Patnaik, a lot of work has to be done. So is there a possibility that, like Rioja has been the sort of binder for, I mean, it's available now in India, as you know. However, we haven't reciprocated with our lovely Sula, and certainly not with the wonderful gin coming out of Goa, for example. There's some great boutique gin coming out. Why isn't that being used in diplomacy? But hold that. And on a more serious note, both Guillermo and Oscar Pujol talked about scholarships. They were both talking about how they have gained from that. If you touch upon a little bit about how the scholarship program works, and I know that we have, I think, about 10 scholarships, Ambassador Verma, out of all of Spain. Is there a, I'll get you to answer that. Is there a sort of a quota system, or is there a sort of equivalent ratio to population? How does this work? How does the scholarships work? And Oscar, on that question, there's again a question that's come back as to how can you intern after you finished with Cervantes in Spain? So I'm going to ask Dinesh to start with first, of course, a drink and food being the great binder. We love that. Then go on to the scholarship part of it. And I'll come back to Ambassador Verma.
Ambassador. Oh, well, it's very funny that you took up the subject of gastronomy, because this year in May, we had planned a huge gastronomic gala in India to start off what ICCI wants to do with gastronomy. So we had planned a large number of events in May, June, and then we would have started Indian gastronomic days in all our embassies. And this is a plan which will happen once COVID goes. And we are also looking at standardizing Indian restaurants across the world, which is like what the Italians do and what the Spanish do also, which is restaurants will have certificates showing that this giving genuine Indian food. So this we're going to standardize across the world. This is something which is going to happen sooner or later. But I'm more interested in the Spanish language thing, because it's not just about scholarships. For me, I'm very happy when Indians learn foreign languages. I know it's part of India and ICCI's job to make others learn Hindi and other things, but I'm really not as happy as when I see Indians really learning foreign languages. Because for me, when Indians know a country well, our relationship actually increases much more. Because when the amount of awareness that we have across countries is very low, even though we Indians think we know more about other countries, the lack of cultural empathy is huge in our country. We think everybody knows India and that we also know them, so it is very good, but the cultural empathy is very low. So when I see people knowing Spanish, I realize that then they understand what is Spain all about. The different contours of what Spain is, not only just cuisine, dance, the music, the way they behave, and like you said, Rioja and other things. So I'm willing to work with Casa Asia or with ISA to put in place scholarships to have students go across both sides. So you put in scholarships, I put in scholarships, we put in together 15, 20, 30, 40, you will match each other. You tell me how much you want to do, I will match the same amount. And let's put scholarships to get people across, not just in Spanish language, but in contemporary studies. Because the other part which I find appalling is the fact that many of the young students do not have an idea about the politics, economics, internal politics and economics of each other. They know general international politics as to the relationship between two countries. But there are no experts who can speak, let's say Spanish elections took place recently. You want somebody on TV to talk about internal Spanish politics. We have nobody who knows these things. We need young people to talk. So I'm willing to set up chairs in contemporary Indian studies in Spain. If Spain is also interested to set up contemporary Spanish studies in Indian university, let's work together to put this package in place. And like you said, there is no limit to scholarships. I have a large number of scholarships. I can give you unlimited number of scholarships. So let's
I'm going to come back to you in a second. Ambassador Patnaik, while you're at it, and this is also for Ambassador Verma, India is known world over for really three large sort of strands. One is Gandhi, one is yoga, one is a growing interest in Ayurveda and the healing practices that Ayurveda bring. Is there a way to sort of look at those and include that in the way that
Sanjay is coming to that. The reason I was talking about education is the national education policy which has just come in now. Apart from many other things which has changed, it is now put in a credit system in India, which means that you can take credits to get your course at the end of any. So if we can sign a bilateral agreement with Spain, I want to start small in having Spanish students come to do a semester in India and Indian students to do a semester, pick up the credits and get a degree at the end of the day. Now the governments will put in a framework agreement. Universities can sign among themselves. So if you have, let's say, Ashoka University and some other, or JNU or DU or any other Mumbai University, signing with somebody for exchange of students for a semester. That starts the process of students getting to know each other, spending time in each other's place. They do it with countries across the world. They couldn't do it with India because they couldn't pick up credits from the Indian system. So even if you've done a semester, you don't get the advantage for your degree. So now that's something on the education front I really want to work on. But you touched on two things, yoga and Ayush. On yoga, we are planning a big campaign, which you will come to know very soon. Same thing that we are doing with, we're planning to do with gastronomy. We're planning to do with yoga, which is certification of yoga across the world. So if you are a yoga teacher, you need to get certified that you are actually teaching genuine yoga. So genuine Indian yoga. So we have an examination and our embassies will now be empowered to do the examination in each of them to actually certify that you are a genuine yoga teacher. So that when you become that, you get your clientele because your clientele understands that you know what is genuine Indian yoga. Same with yoga institutes. If you have a yoga institute and you want to have a plaque saying you're a genuine yoga institute, then you'll have to get the certification from the embassy or from the external examiners that we will put in place. Similarly with Ayush, with Ayurveda, the problem that has happened with Ayurveda over the years is that Ayurveda lacked a pharmacopoeia. We did not have a pharmacopoeia which we could take to the West and show them that this is what exactly the different aspects of Ayurveda here. But that is being worked on and we are already at a stage by a year or so, we will have a pharmacopoeia ready. In the meanwhile, experimentation and tests are being done at clinics, hospitals, universities across the world to show that the test results of how Ayurveda actually affects things like diabetes, hypertension, other different diseases. Because unless you have the results in hand and you go for registration of those products, it is very difficult for most countries, particularly in the West, to give registration for your products unless you can prove the pharmacopoeia and the experimentation results. So all this is being worked out. And we want to work with the Spanish authorities because with Spain, there is a large interest in Spain about all these things. And so this is something, all these things are coming into place, but I am very keen on the education aspect, and we want to do a lot on the education aspect and gastronomy, which would have taken off this year, because this was really a big thing which we wanted to do. The Pandit Deen Dayal Upadhyay thing was where we were supposed to start the whole gastronomic journey. And I was really dreaming of eating food all through the year. And now I have to sit at home and drink tea to all of you.
So Ambassador Patnaik, let's ensure that Yermo invites us post-COVID with Ambassador Verma, and he takes us to that wonderful restaurant in Valladolid, and we travel up to San Sebastian to savor some of the food. Yermo, 3 questions for you, because we're going to run out of time, so I'm going to ask these questions and you can answer them. The first is Shama Prasad Ganguly. A curiosity of the Casa de la India maintains a list of Spaniards knowing Indian languages and courses on Indian studies in Spain. So hold that answer. Belen Garcia Nobles says, good afternoon. I'm a teacher of China, India, Japan at Universidad François de Vitoria in Madrid. I share this view of culture as an important tool to approach other countries to build more fruitful relations. I see Casa de la India also focuses on the academic field to build networks between scholars and students in both countries. So apart from joining this kind of events, how can I help my students to get closer to India and maybe build their career in Spain, Europe, India relations? But before you answer that, Yermo, the question that I have for you, so remember those 2 questions, otherwise I'll repeat them, is that Casa de la India in many ways sitting in what was the former capital of Spain, with an enormous history. And the first time I went to Valladolid, staying in this beautiful guest house of the university, it was full of ghosts, and you could see the blood on the streets and all of the Inquisition and stuff. But you have been able to influence in many ways the length and breadth of Spain as we know it, being able to spread through relationships and network, whether it's with institutions in Madrid, performing arts centers, your linkages with France, with other parts of Europe. You've been able to box way above your weight. You know, Casa de la India is finally an institution parked in the middle of Spain, but the way you've been able to take the Indian voice across to other parts of Spain is quite tremendous. You have hosted the first exhibition on Tagore. You've got a bust of Tagore sitting in the premises. You're now going to be opening this fabulous exhibition for the first time of 86 or 76 instruments, which ICCR has loaned you with Somjit. And of course, you're looking at the Pandit Ravi Shankar exhibition, which is also going to open in Casa de la India. Tell us a little bit about how you have managed to do all of this together in a center, which it's not that you have millions of dollars at your disposal. It's not that you have hundreds of people working in Casa de la India, but yet you've been able to do a lot. Give us the secret of that, and also please answer the 2 questions that I posed you. Yeah,
okay, if you allow me, Sanjoy, let's not talk more about the past. Let's see how these experiences can help us for the future.
Sure.
And how the formula can work for the future, for something concrete to share with all of you. And I think it's part of a larger reflection, which I really want to share with you. I think we've come a long way in the last 20 years. And we have already assessed the past, and we have talked about the present. But where do we want to go? And what lessons have we learned? And what are the challenges? And I think if we can delve on these issues, I can answer through that some of the questions that you've just pointed out. I think what has changed, situation in the year 2000 and the situation in 2020, many things have changed. But I'd like to focus on, we have now the right elements. We have the right elements. We have a Cervantes Institute in Delhi, which has established itself. We have a Casa de la India in Valladolid, which is a solid, credible body. We have a Casa, which has endured difficult times and has now again blooming. We have the friendship, we have the mutual attraction, ambition to go a long way. So the elements are in place, and at the same time, in a way, we have the feeling that we're talking about potential all the time, yet there is also a story of somehow missed opportunities. So perhaps we have to find the right formula of how we can go and take things to a next level. And I want to highlight two challenges. First of all, the formula or the belief. I believe in bottom-up and top-down approach. That this is very important. And I believe, or we believe as a team, in the PPP model, the public-private synergy model, and the networking between institutions, because of resources being always limited. So one of the first challenges would be, and I want to answer briefly Ambassador Verma's kind of challenge, where he said, what happens with the content? Why are we not able to reach out to the youngsters? So the first challenge may be, what happens with the content? I think this is part of a larger issue. And culture, it's very difficult to draw youngsters into theaters and performing arts and exhibitions, so on. It's part of the larger problematics. But I think we have to commit to diversify our content. It is quite obvious that we hold on to icons like Gandhi and Tagore and Ravi Shankar, yoga. Yes, these are the big brands. But I think to reach out to youngsters, we have to overcome the digital gap and the age gap. So I think these challenges we're facing now teach us a lot of lessons how we can reach out to youngsters and maybe new audiences. And I really like that the question Ambassador posed in the beginning. Maybe we need to diversify our content. Part of a larger issue, but I wanted to mention it. This is more from the bottom approach. So talking about the future of these relationships, I think nobody can question nowadays that culture, education, and sports as a brand has an effect on economy. I think any country would be quite stupid or dumb not to put it as part of the central discussion in a dialogue. But I think Spain and India need to be reminded that in those political dialogues, in those high-level dialogues, culture, education, which is combined academics and sports, has to be at the core. And this should take us to develop new frameworks. We've mentioned a number of possible MOUs, agreements. These frameworks, agreements, should have action plans with expert panels following up, and this should lead to a planning stage. And maybe it's not about having large events like the Year of India in Spain, the Year of Spain India, which we've not managed to pull off, and we're talking about these missed opportunity. It's maybe more about having solid, regular schemes which are nicely panned out, which may be scholarships, artist residencies, translation programs, well managed and well designed, which continue, which are regular. And it's more about that, the trickle effect, where we can have solid schemes. So to end, how would this be possible? This is possible through networking. Since resources are scarce, it requires coordination between us stakeholders, and it also requires, why not, bringing in the PPP model, because resources are really limited. If we synergize these resources, because after all, what's the budget that India has to promote India and Spain, and that Spain has to promote Spain and India? It's quite a fraction, it's limited. But if we work together and with public and private synergies, we may be able to get somewhere. And very important, there has to be continuity. There has to be a regular program that is part of an action plan that we can follow up on, and we can bring in all our experiences. And the generation of me and Oscar and all those who have nurtured this relationship can have a very important influence on the future and an impact, because we bring into the table, we bring on the table this experience through concrete programs. And I think that's the way to go, and we hope to start a new beginning now. And to answer the questions, yes, we keep track of the India-Spain experts. We had a larger forum also of academic experts, which ceased to continue. Maybe we can do it again online, just as the dialogue forum. I think the online opportunity saves a lot of costs. And absolutely, academics and culture go together. We are starting with the University of Vital a new master's program, hopefully next year. A completely new program, which is business and cultural management. It's an MA program, where we want to involve a number of Spanish universities, and which will branch out for those who want to go into business studies but have to know about culture, and vice versa, can do a postgraduate degree and maybe opt for a job. We need more experts on India-Spain relations. It's not enough with Guillermo's and Oscar. We should have dozens. We should have hundreds of performers, of scholars, and that's the dream. That's my dream.
Thank you, Guillermo, and we need that action plan. There are missed opportunities. Spain is incredible. For those of you who don't know, in the mid-2000s, we took a Bollywood musical, a love story, to Teatro Victoria, a stone's throw away from Casa, and it played for a month. And we went back again and again for that. There's a huge interest, I think, on both sides. Javier Parando, very quickly, there was a survey recently on European football versus cricket, etc. And I don't know whether you know, but Barcelona FC and Real Madrid came out tops in that. And if you were to really build on this relationship that you talked about using sports, whether it's looking at a sports academy, looking at an exchange between Barcelona, which sells, and Real Madrid, which sells every one of its t-shirts at a very large cost in India, even as we speak, and they're devoted fans. And the second thing is, as you said, film, the film that was made from Bollywood in Spain, we call it the Spanish tourism film, because it went through the length and breadth of the country, and I think it drove more people from India into Spain than ever before. But yet places like Granada, etc., to a large extent remain unexplored, or those regions remain unexplored. How can you bring that awareness to India?
Well, let me emphasize something which is obvious, but I think we should mention here. The relationship is very asymmetric. Spain needs to focus in those areas in which it has an added value, because otherwise it will get lost in India, which has a huge population. So I think sports is one of those areas in which we can really add value. I'm not an expert, I'm not very fan of football, but I have been traveling to India, and the first thing people mention to you when you tell them that you come from Spain is, are you from Real Madrid or Barcelona? And this is something that I experienced not only in India, but other countries in Asia. So sports, it's important in itself, but it's also important in the ripple effect that can have. It's a very simple way to penetrate the Indian society and to get to know, because through sports you give publicity to the country, to its culture, to its history. And in that sense, I think in tourism, we need to explore new avenues for cooperation. The number of Indians coming to Spain are still low, and this is another option for us to explore. We want to organize, along with the City Council of Madrid, an international congress on Asian tourism. To show that Spain is a safe destination despite COVID-19, particularly Madrid. Once this new outburst of COVID passes by, we want to position Spain, and particularly Madrid, in the Indian and Chinese markets. So football, tourism, and gastronomy, I think, are the three main areas that we should focus. You mentioned, Sanjoy, all the cinema industry. Well, this is huge numbers. I think Bollywood is a giant in itself. Well, we should seek opportunities also in this field, taking into account that this agreement of 2012 I mentioned before is signed and provides the basis for cooperation between Spanish and Indian companies. So these three main areas, alongside with cinema, I think should make the foundations of our future cultural relations.
Thank you, Javier. And I wanted to leave a suggestion here. You know, when IGADA, Casa de India, Casa Asia, and we used to run the Spanish-Indian Film Festival, the Spanish Festival in India. As I said, you know, there was distribution, there was a huge amount of interest. Today, with technology as it is, and you know, platforms like this, I do believe there's a huge opportunity on streaming platforms, or certainly for us as a group, to be able to revisit that with much less money, and you know, start with a conversation between, you know, some of the great, well, whether it's Almodovar or any of the great actors, and then show the film, and then do a little conversation around it with Indian Express. So I leave that with you.
Let me just mention that a few days ago, we just signed an agreement with Filmin. Filmin is like the Spanish Netflix. So Filmin is based in Catalonia, is a platform for films, which provides films of all over the world. I mean, it's not free of charge, you have to pay a fee, but it's just €8 per month, so it's nothing. We just signed an agreement with them, and we managed to create a channel within Filmin under the name Casa Asia. So every year we provide to Filmin the films translated into subtitle into Spanish and Catalan that we will screen in the Asian Film Festival that Casa Asia organizes in November every year. And apart from that, Filmin has included in the channel Casa Asia all its offer of Asian films, including Indian films. So we have now a big tool to promote Indian films, which is Filmin. I really suggest all of you, all the people who are following this debate, to open the webpage of Filmin and see all the offer. It provides probably the biggest of Asian films. And as you rightly mentioned, this is the future. Online festivals, online platforms which provide, without any need to move to a cinema, particularly in times of COVID, these movies. And for us, it has been an amazing experience. Guillermo mentioned the PPP, private-public partnerships. Well, this is a very good example.
Thank you, Javier. And similarly, we need to do Spanish films in India, like I said. Ambassador Patnaik, coming to you, you know, as you know, Javier, MEA and Ambassador Patnaik, they buy the rights of a lot of popular Indian films and then distribute it. And I think that's an opportunity that perhaps Ambassador Patnaik and Ambassador Verma can discuss with your partners in this particular field. Ambassador Patnaik, a couple of questions. One is Nishant asks of you, there are people of Indian origin in countries like Trinidad and Tobago, Grenada, Suriname, and other lesser Antilles and South American countries. As we are learning Spanish in India at IC, could they also be taught Hindi there? They have their slang of modified Hindi, but I have researched through social media that people, particularly those related to America, Indian origin, want to learn Indian Hindi for betterment of understanding their ancestral culture. So that's a quick question for you. And the second question goes back to the education front, Ambassador Patnaik. Can you just, there's a number of questions that have come in. Can you just quickly tell us what is the process of applying for a scholarship from ICCR?
Wonderful. No, thank you, Sanjay. Regarding Hindi, all over Latin America where there are Indian communities, which is in Trinidad, Tobago, Jamaica, Guyana, Suriname, all over the place, we have large number of Hindi training schools. But like I told you, Hindi we are doing, it is not something we're not doing, but I'm more happier when Indians learn foreign languages than when foreigners learn Hindi. That's my personal thing. But on the scholarships, basically I have to work with Sanjay and the ISA to make sure that we work together to put in place scholarships for the students. this scholarship would be not only just for languages, but would also be for learning, doing, fellowships at a higher level, research programs, joint programs together, or even getting student groups to come across and to each other, doing summer courses together, or even a semester here. So all this we'll have to work out, because like you said, and like Sanjay asked in the beginning in one of his questions, how do we get the millennials interested in each other? And if you have to get them interested in each other, you have to get them to visit each other, to learn languages, to see each other, to go into campuses and do the rest. But here, before you end, I just wanted to say that one is education is the way forward. The other is we are not doing festivals together. And when I say festivals, I just don't mean a JLF or a Festival of India. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about festivals, celebrating Diwali in Spain or celebrating Tomatino in India. That is one part. The other is participating in each other's big festivals. So, for example, the Hayes Festival for Literature, or you have the Classical Theatre Festival of Alhambra, or, you have large festivals which are done there, and we want to be a permanent part of it. I have written to Sanjay, and we are planning it out. We have made a list of things, but I want to participate in a regular way in the big festivals where I don't have to do, but we become an integral part of the festival every year. And similarly, I would like Spanish groups to participate in Indian big festivals that take place. And this, if we can put this, because celebrating festivals is the best way to know each other. And this is something which we are really looking forward to doing. Rest we can discuss. I think we're running out of time, so I'm not going to.
We've run out of time. We've run out of time, but you're absolutely right. That's the best way to know each other. In fact, in Barcelona, the Mercat de Sol has a fabulous outdoor festival, which I think has been scheduled again for next summer. So please look at that. Oscar, to you, really the last word. 2 quick questions. Shama Prasad Ganguly asked, it's surprising to note no mention of the role played by some of the universities in India in expanding basic and higher studies in Spanish and in creating trained resources. I think you've already answered that, but if you can touch on that briefly. And yes. Another quick question is, having studied law with specialization in European customs law in Spain, is there an opportunity to work in India in a field related to that? Oscar, your closing comments on these 2 questions.
Yes, hats off to the Indian universities. If they were not mentioned earlier because there was no time, but they are the pioneers of the study of Spanish in India, especially here in Delhi. They started back at the beginning of the 60s, and they put the so hats off. They did incredible work. They keep doing an incredible work. Say that more and more Indian universities are opening Spanish studies, and I only wish that on our side in Spain we had the same number of universities teaching Indian languages, which we don't have. So my reconnaissance to Indian universities for the field of Spanish, and I wish really a lot of success. The only thing that has changed these years is that we now teach Spanish as a foreign language, which means not only to researchers, but to people, for using for the professional courses. No? So, but of course, universities have done a lot and keep doing a lot. And the increase I was seeing numbers, no? And in the last 10 years, the number of Indians studying Spanish at the universities has gone from 1,500 to almost 10,000 in many cities. So my really deep recognition to them, no? And regarding the other question, well, there are several ways of going to Spain, and for that person here, he should, I think, contact companies in India that are dealing with Spanish firms to see how he can apply his skills and his knowledge of law, Spanish law, related especially to commercial business. No, I think that's a way. Saying also, and I will, that there are many possibilities also for people. I mean, almost all our students find placement first in India itself, in the embassies, in the Spanish embassies, in the Latin American embassies, all of our students, and in tourism, of course, and in other places. No. And my last comment, of course, I was thrilled to learn from Ambassador Patnaik, and we have to sit about this program of scholarships. That's a must. That's a really very important thing. And my closing comment has to do with what Guillermo said, because he seems to be reading my mind all the time. And I say, look, we are here now. We have Casa de la India, we have Casa Asia, we have ICCR, we have Instituto Cervantes. We should also rope in the Spanish embassy in Delhi, and perhaps we should also take in the Foundation Spain Council Spain-India, which is in Madrid, you know. And we should take advantage of this opportunity that there is such a nice understanding, and perhaps start a permanent Indian-Spain forum on streaming, which takes very little, you know, money, and invite relevant people. I mean, say like Zoya Akhtar, like people that been really, you know, at top level, and try to organize, you know, one monthly webinar with all our institutions. We are trying now to sign an agreement with ICCR, because then we will have the main public agents in the relations between, cultural relations between India and Spain all together for the first time. We have an opportunity, we have a window here, and we can do that. And doing, even if it's a humble and a simple thing like a permanent forum on streaming within all these public institutions. And the important thing is that we'll be in touch, we'll be holding the thread together. And out of that, many things can come that would benefit Indians studying Spanish, people wanted to go to Spanish that want to come to India and learn more. And perhaps also we will be able to foster and to increase, I think that is lacking in Spain, the lack of Indian studies in Spain. It's very necessary to have more Indian studies in Spain. And as I said, the Indian university is far ahead in that sense, because study of Spanish literature and Spanish, you know, philology is so advanced in India, and I wish to have the same thing in Spain regarding Indian language, Indian culture, and Indian history in general. No? That's a challenge. I think to do an Indian-Spain permanent forum, it's a reality. We could do that now if we want, and I hope that will be one of the results of this wonderful conversation that we are having.
Thank you very much, Oscar Pujol. Thank you, Javier Porondo, Ambassador Verma, Ambassador Patnaik. I'm so sorry I wasn't able to take all these questions that have streamed through this system, but I think it's been a very exciting forum. We could have carried on for an hour, but back to you, Guillermo. Thank you, Thomas, for doing all of the back end and getting us together. And if nothing else, Javier, Oscar, we're very willing to take forward this forum to create this, you know, because of our linkages with Spain and with each of you. But I will take that as a second conversation. Guillermo, over to you, and thank you for making this happen.
Thank you so much, Sanjoy. You're a real pro. We had the right person to handle this session today. He knows India-Spain relations for the last 20 or even more years. I thank you all, speakers, participants, friends, Dinesh from ICCR in Delhi, Oscar also in Delhi. It's got a little late. We couldn't take all the questions. Maybe some of the Indian viewers had to go to sleep, but we were happy to take any queries in our webpage. We have info@casadelaindia.org, or they can write to Casa Asia or to Oscar, I'm sure, and the embassy will also be able to respond maybe. And here in Madrid, Ambassador Sanjay Verma, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure, and your support is very important. Let's continue with this dialogue. And of course, we always call Casa Asia our big sister. And I had this kind of very close relationship from the beginning with Casa Asia. So big sister, little sister, we have to continue working and take it forward. I thank you all so much. And we've kicked this off. We've kicked the Spain-India encounters off. We will try to do one monthly session. We can brainstorm it together. Next month, October, in fact, I think we are connected. There's some kind of a brain connection between us, Oscar, because we've already written to Zoya Akhtar twice this week and invited her to do a dialogue under this platform next month. We may need Sanjoy's help. She's not replying, so an SOS. You know her also. Maybe you can squeeze in an email and she can reply. We would like to share her views with us. And any ideas that come forward, let's take it to another level. Thank you so much. And I have to say,
Guillermo, just one question for you. Where could one study cultural diplomacy and cultural management in Madrid? Is there a university in collaboration with the embassy? So I don't know whether Ambassador Verma or you will.
We get quite often, and there are a number of very good management courses, cultural management in Valladolid and at the Complutense University and University of Valladolid. There's not much more time. They can write to us. We can give them the details. I think I have to thank all our partners. And let's start with, of course, Cervantes Institute, Casa, the Spain-India Council Foundation. Thank you so much. We're patrons of Spain-India Council Foundation in Madrid. They're doing a great job. We want to continue working with them. Teamwork Arts in Delhi, City Council of Valladolid, Embassy of India in Madrid, ICCR and Universidad de Valladolid. Muchas gracias, and good evening. Namaste.